Hello, Yes But Why listeners. This is your host, Amy Jordan. Welcome to episode 209 of Yes But Why podcast, featuring Netherlands-based comedian Stephen Morgan. But first, a bit about our sponsor. This episode of Yes But Why podcast is sponsored by Audible. You can get your free audiobook download and your 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/yesbutwhy. When I put in comedy in the search engine on Audible, after the inevitable Divine Comedy, I found a cool stand-up special from Lewis Black. Audible isn't just for books. There is a lot of good stand-up on here, too. Listen up, comedy lovers. Audible is available for your iPhone, Android, or Kindle. Download your free audiobook today at audibletrial.com/yesbutwhy. This week's guest is comedian, actor, and writer Stephen Morgan. Stephen's creative journey has taken him from the UK to Australia to the Netherlands. Since moving to the Netherlands, he has become a performer and a teacher with Amsterdam's easylaughs. We talked about so much in this chat, but my big takeaway from my talk with Stephen was to make the most of every adventure you have. No matter where the world takes you, have fun with it. I now present to you, Yes But Why, episode 209, Stephen Morgan is bursting with comedy goodness. Enjoy. I'm Amy Jordan, and this is Yes But Why podcast. Yeah.
Every single Christmas, our family would have like some get together where like we'd have the relatives round. Like my dad and my uncles would drink beer and form a business every single year that wouldn't exist beyond that evening. My mum and my aunts would like just talk like about everything and anything, and me and my cousins would just play and stuff. But like I liked singing like a lot. I would just sing all of the time about all sorts of things. And there's one memory that sticks in my head of this period where I was really enjoying Whitney Houston's "I Will Always Love You," and clearly it was long enough ago that my voice could actually hit the same notes as Whitney. So adolescence, and there was just like a distant blip on the horizon. There was nothing there that was going to make my voice be anything other than soprano. And I remember that, like, my parents were so loving, so supportive of like anything that we were doing. They basically seemed constantly like amazed about the fact that we could do anything at all, which was really like, great for your ego as a kid, because it's like, oh my God, they like drank a cup of water. Wow, you're so amazing. But simultaneously, it leaves you feeling like, oh, I'm really good at things. And I have this distinct memory of like my mum being like, come on, everybody, Stephen's going to sing us a song. He doesn't play any instruments. Well, I suppose I played piano a little bit, but this was not the center of attention for this particular performance. And I literally had "I Will Always Love You" played on like, I guess it was a tape or something, and me singing along over the top of it. And all of my family just kind of like, just putting up with it. I have no idea how they didn't like burst out laughing, or how they didn't have that cynicism or anything, because I'm just like this little kid who's just there like going, and I will love it. Just all the way through, properly sincere, not a hint of irony or sarcasm, just so pure. And yeah, it was like every Christmas I had to do some sort of performance for the family. It just became the tradition,
Did they love it, though? Did they give you, like, applause? Were they very excited at the end? You got, like, positive feedback about it?
I think they were excited and positive in that same way as when you kind of, like, I don't know. I mean, like, they were very, like, forgiving. They were very, they were positive, but I mean, like, what I'm just imagining myself in their own situation of just like being, oh, that was very good. but trying not to have an expression on your face of like, why are we having to go through this? What are you doing to that child and his expectations of the world by making him think that just by singing these songs like this, that people will respond in a positive way? So I just had a loving family, I think.
Yeah, I think maybe, when you have kids, like a lot of what they do is really adorable, even if it's really regular. Like my kid very recently, we don't know how he picked this up or what we were watching that led him to have this knowledge, but very recently, instead of saying stop, he has said cut. So we were like, oh no, how did he just become a film director? Because if you're trying to be like, hey, you got to put that food away, he'll go cut. We're like, no, you can't just finish the scene. This is still happening. Cut. So it's hilarious. It's also what is happening? And stop yelling at me, little child. But it's really cute. So
that's true. But there's a certain age, right? There's a precipice. There's a point at which when children do that sort of thing and they have a certain naivety and innocence, and then it's actually very cute, and you kind of feel like, wow, look at their very sort of naive view on the world, and it's so pure and so wonderful. But I feel that then there's a certain age that kids reach where they start to become aware of that innocence and and the fact that they get this good response for just doing these sorts of things. And I think that the reason this particular memory sticks so much in my head is it was probably that age where suddenly I was aware about the fact that it's oh, if I do this, then people respond positively. And there was a certain smugness to my delivery. That was the point probably where the family started to lose the sympathy and become more adult cynical.
Yeah, well, if you come in at it you love me, this guy loves me, you guys, maybe you were phoning it in. I don't know. Maybe at this point, you had done some sweet gigs and they were big fans of you, but you were just smoking cigarettes and drinking on stage at this point. You're hugga, burning love. You guys know. I mean, it was they were what is going on with Steven? He has just lost the love. And then you sang it to them, I will always love you. And they were like, you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe he will always love us. And do they make you sing that now? When you go home for Christmas this year, are they going to make you sing that song?
No. I mean, because it was one of many. I think I had to have a different repertoire every year. Come on.
Right.
Come on, if you have to change it up, if they got the same audience, that they're going to get pulled. But yes, I mean, I do think that was definitely a pivotal memory because that was the one where there was a self-awareness. I mean, years later, we even did things where we would I remember one year where we did an obscure Beck cover of a B-side of his or something from one of his early albums, and it's this. I've got this really potato grainy video of all my family singing along to this "No Money, No Honey" song. I'm my grandmother's kind of she's shaking her hands around and everything like there's some sort of gospel or something, and I'm just what? How did that moment ever exist? It was so beautiful. But yeah, it's oh God.
Oh, man. You know what, though? Think about it, genetically, they always wanted to do what you get to do, and now you get to be, wild and crazy on stage and do whatever you want, and there's an amazing freedom in that, and they never felt like they could have that amazing freedom. So when you were a kid and we're yeah, Grandma, shake those hands in the video, she was this is what I always wanted to do. But you finally gave her the freedom.
That's it. God, see, the way you phrase these things, I just feel so much more better about about these experiences already. This is great.
Well, man, the great thing about looking back at your life is you can make it anything that you want.
This is very true. This is so true.
We're changing this podcast to helping people maintain healthy delusions. Doing it. It's all right.
I wet myself on purpose.
Don't worry, everybody. Your mother loves you. Oh, man. So when you're singing at home, were you singing in school? Did you do choir or musicals in school? Was there any sort of outlet there?
I mean, I played piano when I was very young, and I did that for quite a few years. Got a little bored of it after a while because my piano teacher kept telling me off for not sight reading and playing by ear because I like to improvise. Yay! Ooh, who knew it? And then, eventually my older brother took up guitar, and actually a lot of like my life decisions have come from just my older brother did something, and I went like, hey, that sounds interesting. I'll do that as well. So he took up guitar, and he's playing songs like Nirvana and things like this, and I'm still playing, When the Saints Go Marching In or something. I don't even know what that song is at that age and everything. So I'm like, oh my god, I could play songs that I've heard on the radio. This is a revelation. I should learn guitar. And so I took that up. I mean, I did sing in a choir at one point as well. I have like no religious connotations, but it was just the fact they kind of just came around to our school one time and were like, oh, we're looking for people singing in a choir. By the way, it's paid. And I was like, oh, I'll go. I'll do that. Yeah,
that's how they get.
Yeah, that's how they get you.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, you're at weddings on the weekends, and my first purchase was my first what do you call it? A paycheck? I guess it was called cash in hand. But with my first payment from the church was to buy myself like this industrial style water pistol, which which at the time was my number one life priority because I felt like I was not getting the most out of my water trajectory when shooting my friends and getting soaked by them during that summer. So,
hey man, you spend your money on what's important to you, and sometimes it's a solid water gun,
Mm-hmm.
You never know. If you had that water gun now.
Still is.
Yeah.
No, God, no. I know, right? That would have been a great kind of rosebud moment, That would have been my Citizen Kane.
I mean, or turns out it's hoarders, and like we turn the cameras on, and it's like, oh my God, there's so many boxes behind him.
Don't tell anyone how I live, please.
I live inside these boxes. They're my things. I have it here somewhere. Let me find it.
Yes, it's in 1964. I'm not that old. No, come on.
1964.
Hey, look, I was like trying to pick a year in my head. This is improv, hey? This is a lot of the time. It's just like these little things. I feel like maybe it's a past life. We may never know.
A past life in 1964. I'm going to venture to guess you were born not that far after that. So, like,
whoa, hey, I'm an 80s guy.
Regardless, this person who's hanging out in 1964 has to die before you're born, right? Tragic, for you to be the same soul, right? Like, isn't that how reincarnation works? But then you have to wonder,
it's like, is it instant? Is there like some sort of waiting room or like, I don't know. Dally counted, you take a ticket and wait, like a purgatory. What's going on in the between? I don't know. Or is it like literally kind of like, bam, okay, oh, here we are. Is it like Quantum Leap? Is it like as soon as one life ends, there you go, and you just look in the mirror, you see a different person, you say, oh boy, and then the theme.
If only we all had theme music like that, right? Like when a big change happened and all of a sudden you heard theme music and you're like, oh, okay. I'm a new person. Great. Awesome. All right, I'm into it. Yeah, I'll wait. Pictures of me. Okay, great. I'm ready. What am I now? I live in Georgia. It's 1938. Great. If only, but like the problem is like in Quantum Leap, he gets all this context. Like a guy shows up and he's like, all right, these are the things you need to worry about. By the way, these are the people we hate. And these are the people we love. Try to be mean to these people. That's what they like right now. Stuff like that. We don't have that. Like, you just, like, pop in and you're like, what's happening? I'm going to tell you my entire belief of the afterlife was built on the Albert Brooks movie, Defending Your Life. So, like, that's, if you know that movie, that's what I think happens.
Oh, okay.
Are you aware of this movie? Am I just talking to the wind here?
No, I haven't seen it. I'm not aware of it.
It's classic. It's available on Amazon now, everyone who's sitting at home quarantining. But it's an Albert Brooks movie. It's really amazing. He dies, spoiler, and goes to this, like, the whole movie is after his death. He goes to this purgatory place where he has to defend his life to, like, some judges. There's, like, 3 judges. They sit there, and they, like, pop up, like, videos of times in his life when he did bad things, and he has to be like, see, the reason why is. And so the whole idea, it's just sort of like angsty Albert Brooks, like, oh my God, I didn't live a good life. But also coupled with a lovely little love story between him and Meryl Streep, who fall in love in Purgatory. So that's the movie. It's lovely. And I actually believe, because I watched that movie so many times as a kid, that that's what happens when you die. And like, so at the end of the situation, so at the end they decide whether you get to go on to like heaven or whatever, and they don't like call it that, but you know, it's like you get to go on or you have to go back and try again. So that's how I imagine it. It's like you go in, they're like, how'd you do? And you're like, not so good. And they're like, all right, go back again, figure it out, see you in a little while. And they're like, see ya.
So it's like a computer game then. I get it. Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes you go in and they're like, good job. Oh my goodness. Nailed it. And then there's high fives all around. And then you get sent to somewhere else, which is whatever that is, I guess. There's endless pasta.
Ooh, yeah. There's a sequel waiting right there.
Yeah, because exactly what we need is an Albert Brooks, Meryl Streep vehicle for right now. That's what we're all looking for.
That's the gap we didn't even know we had.
Guys, they could save everything. Just tell us what happens. Oh my God. I don't know how we got off on an afterlife tangent. So tell me more about like you growing up. Tell me about your theater. When was the first time you did comedy that you were like, let's do some comedy?
Okay. Well, I was even though music was my main thing, I was definitely what you would call a class clown, I guess. In the sense that, you know, it's like, oh, yes, you get a lot of positive reinforcement from making jokes and making light of situations to an extent where you kind of like use it as a substitute for personality. But that's more about the therapy than anything else. But, you know, it was really kind of a case of, I mean, I don't think it's an uncommon trajectory, but it's just more of a case of making jokes and just like, and it was one thing that it was like, no matter what else that was going on in my life or no matter what else that was happening in school and things like this, that I knew that it's like, well, I got this going for me, you know, I can make people laugh, that's fine. Everything else, it can suffer and everything, but I got this is my bedrock. But as a result, it was always something then that I never really wanted to kind of take that leap into something like comedy directly, because I was terrified of the idea that if this one thing, which like no matter what else happens in my life, I got this, I can make people laugh, etc., etc. And then if somehow I went into that and then I just had that one core belief of myself like shattered, that people were kind of like, oh, you are incredibly boring and uninteresting, and you know, all that laughter was just because of familiarity, then I just imagined it would just be like the most destroying thing like that could possibly happen to me. So like a lot of people, I think that it was always one of those things where I was like, yes, I will try stand-up comedy and it will be an undisclosed date in the future, but I will write my perfect 5 minutes before then, and I haven't written any of it yet, but when I get around to it, it's going to be so good, and I'm going to have it so prepared, and every single second is going to be so like accounted for in terms of like audience response, and I will be so in control and so worldwide in my first ever go at this. But yeah, it's going to be amazing, and that's the only possible outcome that could happen with this. So yeah, it was a long time before I ended up doing that. But yeah, instead I say instead as if it was like a plan B, but like no, I mean I loved my music, I loved playing, I loved like creating, I loved improvising, I loved doing things through that, and that for a long time that was like my outlet, my creative outlet, and what I really got a lot out of. But when a particular project that I was working on, which was probably the one I was most heavily involved in, a band called Neon Highwire, dissolved when I moved from London to Australia, which kind of was a logistic problem, being the opposite side of the planet.
They're not close. They're not close.
They're not close. No, both physically and in time and everything. Yeah. And so it was like I mean, geez, you really realize, you really feel it when you're kind of like, oh, all my friends and family now are not only a long way away, but they're all asleep when I'm awake and vice versa. So this is fun.
Yeah, super weird.
Yeah. but that it wasn't until I moved to Australia that I actually took up improv and comedy like directly, and that was just basically through being in a position of like having every single thing that you have and know about your life stop and end, and just like starting it again in a new place and just being like, well, I guess I'm not those things that I used to be, and I can try new things, and there's no one I know to disappoint, so to speak.
It's like we were talking about before. This is you being a new person. You got to be your new person.
Yes, exactly. I mean, when you said that, I was very kind of, it really hit a nerve, because that was very much an experience that I'd had, and I had like limited versions of before that in my life, but it wasn't until moving to the opposite side of the planet that it was such a kind of a redistinction, like a rediscovery of myself and what really mattered and what didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, you had to be you, and you were the only one there to say whatever that was, because nobody else around you had any idea what you were.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing how much you don't even realize it when you're in it, but just how like expectations of those who are closest to you. And that doesn't even mean negative expectations, but that just means kind of like they know what you are, what you were, what you've come from, and what they respond to and how they respond to that, compared to a bunch of strangers who are kind of like, oh, you're just some British guy who just are coming from a blank slate, and they're just trying to make sense of you from nothing at all. And then you also realize it's like, you're trying to make sense of me. Well, me too. I really don't know who I am right now. And this is simultaneously terrifying and liberating.
Yeah. May I ask, you had spent a lot of time focused on your music, and you got involved in Neon Highwire, and you were making things, and I mean, I've listened to it. I looked at a couple of the videos. It seemed like a fun situation. What was the pull to get you to change that? Like, were you just like done with the project and you needed to move forward artistically, or was there something else that like got you and moved you across the world?
It's a combination of things. I mean, obviously there was the physical thing of the moving, but simultaneously, and perhaps partly of what inspired the move as well, is that I was like making like electronic pop music sort of thing, and and realizing as well that we were kind of like getting a little older, and it's a very sort of young game in that sort of terms of that sort of music and that sort of thing that you're doing, and also that. When you're in a band with people, especially when you're like meeting multiple times a week for years on end, it is as intense as a relationship. And it has all of the highs and lows that a relationship will have, like a romantic relationship. And so there's so many things that are kind of about, trying to get the best out of someone, trying to make sure that someone's happy, sometimes getting frustrated with people, sometimes showing that to them in like positive ways, sometimes showing that to them in negative ways. But this was one particular circumstance where I was so like deeply invested into it and so kind of like bonded to these two people that when I then had this impetus of moving, I was just kind of like, Jesus, it's like, am I going to be able to recreate something like that? I really wasn't feeling any inspiration for anything musical. And I really did kind of like feel like this fear that I'd had for so many years and for so much of my life of actually putting this like, this comedic side of me to the forefront and actually exposing it in some sort of way that was going to really sort of say to me whether people did find me funny or not, or something I could learn about it, or at least acknowledge that it was just a side of my personality and not just this kind of, I don't know, this thing which I couldn't speak of or couldn't really properly critically analyze. And actually explore it and see what it was like, and see if it was something that I was going to enjoy, and see what it was that I was going to enjoy about it, and see what it was that I assumed about myself, about performing, about all these sorts of things, which until that point I'd only really imagined or vicariously kind of learned.
So you kind of like your comedy side had to come out. It was like bursting and you had to get out of there, but like I don't know about you, and here's the thing. I understand moving. I moved far away from where I grew up too, but like not to Australia. But London's got a lot of good comedy. I mean, like there's a lot of good theater, a lot of good performing. Why move?
It's so true. But you know what's also intimidating about London is the fact that like I was very much a consumer there as well, in the sense that I was like going out. I was like, oh, what should I do? What should we do this evening? Oh, let's go watch, some incredibly like renowned internationally touring show that is coming to town for like one night only. And that's happening like every single night of the week in London. You are surrounded by so much talent, so much incredible, just even on like the small scale, even just like seeing these low key theatrical productions. And you were just seeing these people who had come to this city to really try and make something of themselves. And to be honest, I found that so intimidating, not on a conscious level, but just there I was kind of just thinking like this was incredible. I was coming up from performance out of performance. I was just enjoying these things. I was reviewing these things and I was seeing them and I was just thinking, how do these people even do this? This is so amazing. I was so blown away so often that the idea of just kind of like me going like, oh yeah, I could do that didn't really register so true in my mind. I just felt like, oh my God, this is something that these people can do and I cannot.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. London is a big deal town, and I can't imagine like how hard it is for any band to put up a show, never mind a show that is a smaller theater group or something like that. When you're right, every night of the week, it's like last concert ever with this amazing band. And oh, by the way, this guy's coming out of hiding. Like what? Come on. Like, Banksy just drew a building and it's real. What? How is that? That's not. No. What? And you're like, guys, do you know I can juggle? It's really difficult. I can see that now. I understand. It's like I'm from Boston.
Like guys,
I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and everyone was like, "Why didn't you go to college there?" And I was like, "Everybody goes to college there. Like, I'm not one of those people. I just can't be part of the like." Thousands of billions of people. No, I'm not that crowd. I need to find another crowd. Yeah. So I get it. I moved to Texas. My entire upbringing, people were like, what? You went way? Some of my family members still think I have like horses and stuff. I'm like, I live in a city. Come on. Right? So right. How did you were you spinning a globe with and you just picked Australia, or did somebody say this is a comedy hub, you got to come here? How'd you get there?
No, I mean, like with so much of my life, the major decisions I have kind of gone with the flow. And my ex was someone who had lived in lots of places, had traveled the world a lot, and was just finishing her PhD in Oxford. And basically, she was like, well, where should we go next? And I'm kind of like, well, I'm ready to go anywhere because that feels like the band's coming to an end. And I've always wanted to live in another country. I feel like I would learn something, all of these kind of these hashtag type of inspirational motivations to move somewhere else. And I was kind of like, let's do something. And she got a job in Brisbane in Australia, which I have to admit, I was kind of like, well, I know Melbourne, I know Sydney, and the Brisbane reputation is a little bit rednecky, but, it's like, I'm sure it'll be fine. It's one of the biggest cities. And so
you really get me moving to Texas. You really do. It's so ridiculous.
I felt like I need to throw that in there.
I love it. No, exactly. It's like, dude, we are connected. Similar journeys. All right. So tell us, you're going to Brisbane. It's not too bad, right? You guys get there. Oh. Bully you for going with the girlfriend, right? A lot of people, I'm sure, would have been like, listen, you're great. Good luck with you. Have a great time over there. Yeah. I'm swinging somewhere close by. So good on you for taking the adventure.
Well, that's it. I mean, because to me, it was kind of like a now or never type of thing. And I felt like it was something which would be a positive experience or an experience in some way that I'd learn something. And it really was. All of those things that I talked about before, the fundamentals of kind of of discovering myself. I mean, also being a younger brother as well, and often kind of with a slightly lazy side of my personality of just kind of someone else is doing this, they're having a good time, I will do that too. and realizing that once you take the other people away, or the people who are around you, you can't really empathize with as much or anything like this, you're kind of forced to start to really genuinely think about like, well, what do I like and what don't I like, and what parts of me do I want to kind of explore more and really push more, and which parts don't I? And so, yeah, I remember I started I took a stand-up comedy course as a sort of a thing of like, oh, okay, you know, that's probably like a nice entry point that means that I'll be forced to actually do it rather than just to keep talking about it. I also took up Taekwondo, which, you know, this was definitely a point in my life when I was doing things which I was kind of like, the me 2 years before that would have just gone, huh? What?
Yeah.
So, yeah, just really embracing that. And it was really cool and it was really nice. And it was only a short time. And after the stand-up thing, then I took up improv. And whilst stand-up is kind of like a roller coaster of emotional intensity and all this sort of thing, improv was the one thing which, no matter what else was going on, but I was just like, I am loving this. I am constantly buzzing and engaged with this on every level, and I come away from every single jam, every single show and everything just kind of bouncing off the ceiling. So it was a really good revelation.
What school did you take your classes at? Where did you start?
Yeah, so there was probably the most prominent improv group in Brisbane were called Improv Mafia. They put on shows at the Brisbane Comedy Festival every year, which is like a curated festival with like an international lineup. But they also put on like weekly shows at a bar there in town. They run a lot of courses. You know, they really have the kind of like end to end everything from like people who are doing courses to like the big shows with auditioned casts type of thing going on. And it was really cool. I mean, it was, you know, I was like playing with people who'd like never done anything before, and people who had like over 20 years experience who, you know, and just everything in between. And just right from the beginning was getting all sorts of, people to play with. And and it was just like, it was really exhilarating, just the differences between those, and just kind of went into everything with a sort of attitude of like, well, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to join in with that. I mean, after my second improv course, I auditioned for one of the shows at the comedy festival, which was a Harry Potter based improv show. And actually, that would have been after my first one. So that would have been like after doing improv for 3.5 months. And I went to this audition, and then the director at the end, you know, there were about say 30 or so people in there, and he kind of came over to me and he said like, I know everyone in this room, but I don't know who you are. Can you just give me a little explanation about your background? So I sort of explained to him, you know, I just like very much wanted to be honest. I was like, I've only been doing this for a few months, and I really enjoy it. But I can't lie to you and say that I've been doing this for years. I just took this up, and I really enjoy it. So I ended up kind of getting an understudy role in that show, but also front of house. So like a lot of audience interaction stuff at the beginning and end. But it meant that I actually then went through the entire rehearsal and practice with the main cast for then the next like few months. And that was on a weekly basis. And like, you know, I was the least experienced there by far. And it was amazing. And it was just like this whole feeling of like, even though I was clearly the least experienced there and I was going in with everything that I had, that everyone was so supportive and so kind of like, and also being so vocally critical, but in a positive way about things that I could change and improve. And I was just loving it because even though I knew that like maybe I hadn't done the best of jobs, I knew that like, you know, I could tell from the way that they were giving me this feedback that they were like, you know, I mostly dig what you're doing, but, you know, this is, if you do this, then you could be even better, or, you know, or think about this. You're forgetting this part of what you're doing. You're getting too caught up in this, and it was an amazing experience. I loved every minute of it.
That's so fun. What a great like a first experience to like get involved and be so totally immersed.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a huge, like, kind of, I mean, because like the show itself, then, it had I think because of the Harry Potter affiliation, every single one sold out, and they were like, they had to add extra dates onto it. It was such a good show. And like the core format of it was just, a hat full of 200 periphery characters from the Harry Potter verse, and just a 2-sentence description of each of these characters. They went into the audience, someone would pick out one of the names, the name would be read, and then the 2 sentences that describe them. And then instantly from that, then a 60-minute show based on that particular character and something about them, which, was for me, for someone who was new, was kind of like, so we get nothing else? And it's 60 minutes. Like, yeah.
We just keep going, and then they watch. Yeah. Then nobody leaves. What's happening?
I know. And they know we're making this up, right? They know, right?
They don't know. They don't. You know as well as I do. They don't know. They don't know.
I know. It was
they
so
don't
fun.
Believe it.
So many
no matter
times.
how many times you tell them, they don't believe you. It's hilarious. It's hilarious.
It's so nice, though. It's like when they're like, "No, you didn't." I mean, like, you must have prepared some of the things, and you're like, "No." I was like, "But that bit must have been rehearsed." I mean, I get the other bit, and you go, "No." It's such a lovely feeling, that.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. No. It's so funny. I can't tell you the number of meetings I've like legitimately had running theaters where we're like, how do we let them know without directly letting them know? Because they're really not getting it. Like, people were like, you guys don't do improv. We're like, we do improv, please. Good Lord. Like, yeah. But that's so funny. So you mentioned you got into the Harry Potter show like after 3 months of being part of it. Now, were you 3 months part of like a community doing random jams, or you like taking classes and you have some sort of background of how to do it? Or did you just get thrown into the water with the Harry Potter thing?
So so that was 3 months where I started with a course, an 8-week course, which had a graduation show. And then I'd been to a few jams after that not jams, they were actually performances. So they were kind of like, not directly, but roughly like a maestro sort of format, but on a weekly basis with a first turn up kind of thing. They were very sort of like low key, things, but it was good that it was on stage, because you always had that thing of like, you knew that whatever you were doing was on stage, rather than kind of like, oh, I'm just going to stop here and just talk about what we've done. You had that extra sort of thing that driving you, that there was an audience, even if the audience was small. So I really didn't have much like in terms of experience or background in that. I admit I'd really sort of like gone head first into it. Like, so after the course, I'd really sort of piled into those performances, but I very much, did not have the experience, especially the performance experience in that medium, and playing with so many different players, and really kind of like playing with different formats and really starting to understand it. It was very much like when you're taking driving lessons and you're kind of like, okay, now I know how to change gear, or now I know like, which side of the road to drive, but I'm probably at my most dangerous now because I don't really know what I'm doing, yet I'm actually capable enough to be on a road.
That's why people always fear level 1 recital shows. They're like, oh God, it could go terribly, terribly wrong. And sometimes it does. Oh boy, howdy does it. I've watched it where I'm like, oh no, what are we doing? Why are we talking about this? No, but it's happening in front of an audience. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's my class. They're doing that. Then after they're like, we probably shouldn't have talked about women's rights. No, you shouldn't have. No,
Oh yeah, there's always
Fun things
my
like that
God.
where all of a sudden you go down a political rabbit hole and you're like, don't do it. You're not prepared. Like, oh
Like
man.
the number of times, like it's mostly in stand-up with that though. It's like when I'll see someone who will try and do edgy material, and they're kind of like they feel like they're ready. They feel like they've really thought through their viewpoint, and it's just like whenever you're trying to up the stakes in terms of like what you're trying to do, and you really need to be so aware of your delivery, but instead they just sound like that drunken guy on a corner who's just shouting slightly offensive things and like waiting for people to respond, but they don't. They don't respond, or they respond with silence. That's their response. That's all you're getting, and that's all you deserve.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm going to say that stand-up has the tendency to sometimes go a little crazy when it comes to, it being a viewpoint into a person's psyche a little bit too much. You're like, oh, he's angry. Oh, no. He's angry. Quick, get everyone from outside who's smoking to come watch this. He's angry. Like, I've seen people go on like total meltdowns and we're like, oh boy. But, when you're the person doing it and you think you're being edgy, any comedian who's listening to this, if anything that you're doing, you're like, this is edgy, take a look at that with your grandmother and see if you can't find a way to communicate it to her. And then if you can, you have edgy material. But like, no.
That's a nice one. I like that as an analogy or like a method to really test your material, to really think it through, to really think about the fact, you have this generic audience. It's not just this like straw man that you developed in your head who's just kind of like basically you, but the you that loves you and just like keeps going, yeah, you're great. I agree with your opinions. Yeah.
Well, not only that though, but like I feel like edgy material, quote unquote edgy material, is often well intentioned in that they feel like they have a point to make. But the problem is they don't know all the words to say to truly make that point because it's in their head, so like it's already half told to them, so they just go like, and then like maybe they shouldn't be in the stores is all I'm saying, and you're like, wait, what are we talking about? Like, so they're halfway through it. That way if you check it with someone who's like probably going to disagree with you, you have to tell them in like a much larger sense. So you're like, okay, grandma, listen, so there's a thing that's happening and there's a problem, and now I have a problem with it because of this reason. Now this goes on and I'm upset about it. What do you think? And she can be like, you probably shouldn't be upset about it. Or she can be like, I am equally as outraged, and then you can find a way to like, then you've been able to explain it. And that's the hardest part for me. I teach writing classes. And it'll be like, we make a lot of assumptions about what we think the audience knows about what's going on, but they don't know. Because people will be like, what do you mean? Should I say outright, I don't understand what this is as the character? I was like, yeah. How else does the audience know? Like, if the audience isn't like, I'm angry about peas, like, nobody knows that guy's going to keep getting upset about the peas. Like, someone has to say it. You know what I mean? We're not making like a movie that's like a still shot on some peas and then a still shot on his like angry face. And you're like, oh, I see what's happening. Like, that's not, you have to say out loud everything that you want in comedy, and a few times, because the thing is, it's like ringing a gong over and over. That's what comedy is, right? It's not like playing a tune where there's like a beginning, middle, and end, and there's like a bridge, and you're like, oh, I feel like I learned something by the end. No. No one's learning. Everyone's just being crazy. Gong, gong, gong. There's no like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't ring this gong because it's super annoying and everyone hates it. No, that person never occurs to them. They're never thinking that, right? So you have to be bigger and wilder and also re-explain stuff. And I feel like a lot of times when stand-ups talk, they're talking like they're having a conversation. And that's great. But you have to be like, here's the context of where my brain's going. Because I feel like we were talking about earlier about how like there's just like different kinds of people, and like the way they process the world, like you'll see them say something and you're like, what does that person mean? And then when someone like explains the larger context of where they're coming from, you're like, Oh, yeah, no, I get why he's angry about that now. That makes sense. Yeah, he should be angry. You know, but like you're like at first you're like, wow, this guy is what, you know, so everything needs context. And I find that in stand up, there's less context than in like an improv or a sketch scene when like your context is the like desperate moments where you and your scene partners are like secretly telling each other things in front of the audience. And the audience is like, they're just doing dishes. And really you're like doing dishes in a way that like looks at them like, I'm the angry roommate. Okay, get it, you know.
Yeah,
but
no, that's so true. Yeah, because like it's suddenly the context is so much like narrower, and it's really easy to get. I mean, I think that so many of those things you just said are like general good lessons for life, full stop, and interacting with human beings. And realizing that people may not fully understand where you're coming from, or you know what your context is, and whilst you know, and even like people who you are close to, you know, you may make assumptions, or they may have the goodwill of you as a person and the you that they know, but they may not fully understand what it is you are trying to describe to them. And you know, you may end up in this kind of cycle where you're just all kind of like agreeing with each other, but no one really knows what anyone's talking about.
Yeah, I feel like that's like all human relationships. Now we're in the quagmire of human relationships. God, Stephen, what happened to us? God, why?
What happened? Oh my goodness, this just too much isolation.
Yeah, you're right. No, but okay, so here we are in your story. You're in Brisbane. You're doing comedy. You're doing great. Things are going. How many years did you spend there? Because you're not there now.
No, so I was there for 3.5 years. And I threw myself heavily into improv and stand up. And you know, I ended up organizing like the Brisbane Fringe Festival. Well, it's called Bris Funny Fest, but that was through someone. Yeah, that was quite a funny thing because the person who previously organized it was moving to the UK and approached me and sent me messages on Facebook saying like, look, there's like a lot of good comedy in this city, but everyone is a bit of an ass. But you seem to have your shit together more. Do you want to organize this? You're probably like one of the only people who I think could potentially organize a festival. So I was like, wow, so much praise. I feel so honored at this, you know, you are not as shit as everyone else type of talk.
So you're the least asshole person I've met in a long time. What do you think about this?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, like, I had no idea what organizing a festival meant, but simultaneously, I was still riding on that wave of like, well, yeah, okay. You know, how hard can it be?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So we ended up like, yes. I mean, it was more. I mean, the toughest part of it all was dealing with comedians who are basically like little children who don't really like respond well to most things. Particularly if you ask them to do something that isn't what they want to do in that particular moment, or you're responding to a particular act who's kind of like, when I performed in this city, I had this response, and when I'm performing here, I have less response. Why is that? And what are you going to do about it? And it's like, okay, how do I say to them, we're a Fringe festival, you can, I don't know what your swearing policy is, but yes, you can... Yeah, yourself. And also perhaps the reason you're not getting as much publicity is because all you've been doing is talking about that other festival that you're doing, and maybe there's a reason why no one knows that you're here. You know, these sorts of ego trips. There was a lot of massaging and that sort of thing going on, which I mean, like, you know, and you only want to do it to a limited extent. You want people to actually perform, but simultaneously you're like, come on. I mean, like, what do you need from me? I mean, what do you expect us to do for you? There's, you know, we're trying to be fair across all the different acts. I mean, like, the funny thing again was like the improv groups that we had going on. It was just very much like, here's our media kit, here's our press pack, this is the performance we're going to put on, here's some high resolution photos. What else do you need from us? We got some promo videos, and I'm like, oh, cool, great, okay, thank you. Like everyone else is just kind of like, you know, just constantly chasing up and things like this. But no, it was a really cool experience, and it was really nice, and it went really well. You know, it was like we got like I think in the end we had 100 shows with like 51 different acts, and yeah, and like you know, and it was we had a team of people who were on it, and it was really cool as well to learn from them. You know, there was like someone from marketing, and I'm kind of like, oh, so I shouldn't post on Facebook 12 times a day? Oh, okay, cool. Oh, that's good to know. Oh, okay, so they deprioritize my. Oh, okay, and I shouldn't like just, you know, there's all these like little things you kind of learn along the way of like do's and don'ts of like putting on shows, of like, you know, of how to promote your shows, of all this sort of thing. And yeah, and then by the end of it, then it was like, I don't know, when you kind of like take on a big project like that, and once the actual thing was happening, and I was just like, oh, I can just watch some shows, and then you just feel this kind of like certain emptiness that just like goes inside you, and you just kind of like, huh. It's all now happening, and I don't do anything, and now I have spare time. What do I do? Who am I? Where am I? Oh my God.
Oh yeah, man. That is so tough after you like do something that's like super, super busy like that, and then you're like, wait, what's my next project? Nothing? Oh God, why? You're craving that you could be on the phone with some guy being all like, just a photo of you, any photo of you. What do you mean you don't have a photo of you? This is 2017. Like,
what you sent me was a thumbnail. It was 100 pixels by 100 pixels. No, I need the actual photo.
You sent me a photo
you sent the same thing
of
again.
A photo. What is going on?
No, you sent me a photo of yourself. You need to take the photo. Not your camera's facing the wrong way. No, you're. Oh God.
Can you do anything right now? Yeah, you know what? The interesting thing is, I wish that we could say like, oh, that's just something you deal with entertainers. But I'm going to say across the board, no matter what you do for a job, there are people like that where you're like, what do you mean you have nothing prepared right now? Like, you're here for this thing. Why don't you have any of it? Like, they told you to wear sneakers. Why are you in high heels? What's going on? Like, oh my God. I can't tell you the number of like, I used to do temp jobs and like people would show up in crazy wrong outfits. And I'd show up correct and they'd be like, oh, thank God. And I was like, what? And they're like, just the last 3 girls that we had in here. It was just not good. And I was like, oh, okay, great. What am I doing? What's terrible? But, you know, people just don't. Some people just don't know. They just don't know how to be.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's true, and that's the thing is, yeah. I mean, like you say, it happens in all sorts of walks of life, and you just have to get used to the fact that certain people are certain ways, and you know, you can either kind of fight against that, or you just find the ways to make the most of it, and not let it get too much of you, or if it does get too much for you, then find a way of changing your life in general. You know.
Sometimes I like to think we all have different strengths. We all have different things we're good at and different things we're bad at. So, you know, maybe the strengths they're bringing to the table, you know, they overcome the negative aspects. You're like, well, you know, he hasn't ever learned a line that I've given him for any of the sketches, but, you know, the audience loves him, and they come to watch him bumble around the stage and figure out what the scene's about, so let's keep him in the show, you know, things like that.
Yeah, it's like an element of letting go in that. You know, there's an element of kind of like just letting go of control and realizing that it's like things might not go exactly as you had them to plan, but you know, they can still happen in a way that can be good, that can potentially even be better than you had as the original plan. I mean, I know that that's like core improv, but it's like it's easy to forget it in other aspects of your life. You know, it's easy to kind of like think. You know, it's like, yeah, I mean, like improv is one thing, but the thing is you need to do what I say right now, or things are going to go very wrong. You know, you can't just apply that in general things if you have other people you're depending on.
Yeah, though the idea of adjusting to whatever happens in the world can be very helpful, say in apocalyptic times like we're in now. You know, sometimes when you have to adjust everything you ever understood in 3 seconds because there was a new alert on your phone, it's like, oh, okay, cool, great. this is a thing I need to understand now. Like, as opposed to, you know, my brain having the ability to switch to something else. You know, it's like, I thought we were astronauts on the beach, but it turns out that we are aliens in Saturn, and I'm cooking an omelet. Okay, great. I'll do it. That seems fine. Yeah. Somebody said it out loud, and they made it real, and now that's what I'm doing. You know what I mean? In the same way that, like, anything happens, you're like, oh, okay, now I have to wear masks when I go outside at all times when I speak to every person. Cool. Got it. No problem. That's a life thing now. Fashion is real.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's like there's an instinct, I think, as well as, like, you know, the more that you kind of, maybe the more you age or whatever it is. I don't know what the real, like, motivation is behind it, but it's like always a temptation to kind of like go, I have been through X number of experiences, and it's like it's a large number of experiences, which means that I feel like I understand enough now to know that this is right or wrong. Whereas fundamentally, it's kind of like, well, there may be like some flickers of truth to that in some scenarios, but on the whole, it's kind of like a more of a negative thing to have, and to feel like you know better in a particular circumstance or know the way that things should be means that you're beginning to go down that line of, like, basically losing tolerance or deciding that, you know, and that the nothing new is good, or that, you know, that you fundamentally understand things better than anyone else. So why bother listening? Why bother adapting? And that's not healthy.
That's some deep thoughts right there. Yeah. No, like it's real. Not if you don't allow yourself, you know, an openness to hearing what people have to say. I mean, I disagree with lots of people all the time. It's a thing, but, like, you know, that doesn't mean that I don't, like, listen to what they have to say and try to, like, make sense of it. Because my big thing is, like, I don't care if I like you or dislike you as long as I understand. Like, a lot of times I'm like, yeah, of course he made that decision. You see how much money he made? Come on, guys. Come on. Or, like, it benefited him to do the other thing. Well, why are you so surprised? Like, for anything. You know, it's like, he wasn't going to do this to help us. That hurts his business, guys. Like, why would you ever imagine? We have to find a way to make people, it's like any sort of marketing. It's like you have to make people want it for themselves. Like, where they're like, that's my thing. That should be mine. You know, as opposed to like, that's interesting, I want to help somebody else. It doesn't always work that way. You know, people are mostly selfish, and that's a good or bad thing, but it's what sort of drives us forward to continue making decisions for ourselves and being who we are and living our lives. So, you know, I guess to a certain extent it's good because it drives us forward. But, you know.
And also, if you spend too long kind of like focusing on what things aren't, then it'll just make you unhappy rather than kind of like accept things for what they are and seeing what you can make out of them.
Yeah, and enjoy the adventure, right? Who knew you were going to love your time in Australia? But there you did. You had a great time. You're in the community. You're running festivals. People are like, you're a major leader / you're better than most of the rest of these people around here. This guy. But tell me, so you were there for 3.5 years, but you're not there now. What got you onto your next adventure? What led you to the next thing? Was it a job? Were the, like, fans calling you, please come hang out with us? We're over here. How did it go?
Yeah, let's just go with that. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was very. it was the same ex. We were still together, and she had another job opportunity that came up in the Netherlands.
Bless her.
And I have to. Yeah, I mean, like, back to the side of the world that I was more familiar with. And I have to admit that whilst there were some amazing, like, things that I achieved and, like, and expressed and, like, and, you know, and really there was a side of my personality that really got to explore in Australia, which I really had been not doing enough with before that. There was simultaneously a part of me that was kind of like, I don't really have many friends here. Not like, I mean, like, I've got lots of people who I know and people who, when I'm doing a thing, I'll like have a chat with them, check how they are and that sort of thing. But not someone who it's like, you know, oh, I'm having a hard time. Who can I talk to? I realized when I was leaving the country that it was kind of like, well, who do I definitely want there? And it was like a very, very small list. And that wasn't because I was like surrounded by bad people. It was just that I realized that I'd thrown so much into like this other aspect of my life that I'd neglected the fact that it's like, you know, you've got to have like you got to have a community around you. You've got to have that feeling. You've got to have something more than that. And I didn't really have that there, which, now I'm like 2 years out of there. It's kind of, there's only probably about 2 people who I regularly keep in contact with from my entire time there, which says it all, really. But yeah, so to me, it was like, damn, I mean, it's like I'm like losing touch now with the people who I have like a lot of history with, like back in the UK, and the people I grew up with, the people who I got to know in like my the years in my 20s from like living in London and things like that. And so yeah, for me it was like, yeah, let's move back to Europe, so at least I can kind of actually be knowing my parents were getting older and things like this. It's like, well, yeah, so I can actually spend some time with those people again and rebuild those sorts of connections. And so this opportunity came up, and yes, we moved to Nijmegen in the southeast of the Netherlands. The Netherlands is smaller than Texas, so it's a pretty damn small country. So when I said east of the Netherlands, I'm actually now part of easylaughs, which is one of the prominent improv groups in Amsterdam, and I'm in Amsterdam most weeks. So even though it's the opposite side of the country is so small that yes, it takes me like an hour 20 on the train to get there. So
oh wow, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty connected.
Wow, so you're able to like live an hour and a half away and do all your comedy in Amsterdam. Are you running festivals there, or what's your work there? Are you teaching and doing shows? How's that work?
So I got like a day job. I mean, I'm teaching and teaching. I run a comedy night here in Nijmegen, so that's stand up. I'm with easylaughs, who do a weekly show and do courses in Amsterdam. So that's kind of, although obviously that's been affected by the whole COVID-19 restrictions. But it's kind of like I'm doing like lots of things in lots of places across the country. Yeah, I mean, those are probably like the 2 major ones that take my time. I mean, like I've also kind of realized as well that I was like spreading myself too thin. And at the end of last year, I got to a point where I was like, if I keep going like this, I'm going to just like break. So I've kind of really scaled back the stand up now to try and cater for that. But yeah, it's been, I don't know. I've really loved moving here, and I really love this city. And I've made some really good friends here. It's like as if someone needs to tell you how you are supposed to behave when you move abroad. And this time around, I kind of like learned a lot of lessons from what I didn't do in Australia. And I've made a lot more effort to like keep in touch with people and get to know people, and realize that friendships and things like that don't just form by accident, as they did when you're in like university or in school, or, when you're like in your early 20s and things like that, you got to work at them. And even if it's someone you get on with, it's like, they've got their own life going on, and they got things going on. And if you just kind of like have this egotistical view, this kind of like, it'll work itself out, we both like each other, it's all good. And then, suddenly it's like, when did you last see them? I guess it was 9 months ago, but we're still good. It's still fine. It's like, it probably isn't. And, it's like, and even if it is, it's like, is that really what you want? And, do you want to spend every single time that you do meet up with this person just like having this conversation where you go like, oh my God, it's been so long. Oh, what have you been up to? Oh, have you been up to this? Oh, and having some sort of like rundown on your like major life events, rather than having someone who you can spend some more time with and just kind of like say, you know what the best bit about Chernobyl was? So, like when they had the 3.6 is Ronker, you're just like the person who you can just like whatever's in your head at that particular time that you can share with, the person who you're not having to just have the kind of high level conversation with, that you can just actually relax with and just talk about anything on whatever's come into your brain, because you're already involved enough in each other's lives that you don't have to do the other part of it. And that's the part which I'm really kind of like, trying to make sure that I don't lose touch with now I'm in the Netherlands, because I felt that I really lost touch with it when I was in Australia.
So how long have you been in the Netherlands?
Just over 2 years now. So
2 years.
Yeah.
So,
I went from
but you've had some ups and downs.
Yeah, I mean, like said X is now an X.
Yeah.
So, there was a decision of like, do I carry on living in Nijmegen? Do I move to Amsterdam or Utrecht or move back to UK even? Although, I mean, that's also been like a weird anomaly is the fact that since I've moved from the UK, it has changed a lot. There's this big thing that happened. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's called Brexit.
They have lots of opinions about it, and they're very strongly affected by various things that have occurred. I don't know what they are, but I've heard a lot of angst, so I understand why you might not want to swing by. P.S. We love you, and I really love watching your comedy and stuff, but maybe don't come to the U.S. right now either. I feel like maybe it's not a good spot, not your vacation spot you're looking for right now.
Yeah. I
maybe
know.
Later,
and the thing is,
but not right now.
I mean, it's like, we want to see you. I mean, like, come on. It's like, of course we love you. It's just that, things are happening.
Well, it's like there's all sorts of crazy shit too. I mean, like, oh my God. Well, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Let's stick with you
it's
and
not
your
so much
exciting
that.
life. Yeah. I mean, but so you've had a lot of, the reason why I brought up the ups and downs was you had mentioned you had moved around with this ex, but you've referred to her continuously as your ex. So I was like, at some point in this story, the ex part has to happen, and it's happened more recently, right? So, but
that's right.
Like you said, though, something about where you're at kept you there. Is the community a stronger thing? Have you found like deeper friendships with people? I mean, clearly somehow there's something keeping you there,
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's exactly it. And I've got like some really good friends here. I mean, like Nijmegen is like the most left-wing city probably in all of the Netherlands, which is on the whole a pretty left-wing country anyway. It's the one where the Green Party has won for like 10 consecutive years. It's very much a city where people kind of like look out for each other. I live like, it's a place, this is a country where people cycle everywhere, so nowhere is far away. It's like, and there's like designated bike lanes. And I know that sounds like such a cliche thing to say about the Netherlands, but it genuinely makes such a difference to like your quality of life when you're just like, yeah, your friend lives 2 kilometers away, but it's a 7-minute cycle. So, you can just go over there, have a cup of coffee, go home. It's like, it's so convenient. And speaking of someone who lived in London for so long, where it was like, oh my God, you live a 30-minute train ride away where I can put my face in someone's armpit. Oh my God, we're like neighbors. Oh, wow. This is amazing. I've never lived so close to someone. It's just, it's kind of like that sweet spot between somewhere where it's like, it's big enough that, there's like, that you got the relative like anonymity, or you can, I can have a night where I run where I've got people queuing up on the staircase to get in every time I put it on. But simultaneously, it's like, if you want to, I'm like, a 10-minute walk away from like a wood where I can just like escape from it all and that sort of thing. It's got that nice combination of the both, and that combined with the people that I know here and the lifestyle. I don't know. It's for the first time I kind of like really feel like I'm closer to a place where I'm like, this place is in line with who I am, and maybe that'll change in like 5 years or less or something like that. But right now, this speaks to me and this feels good.
Yeah. And it's adult use place. You're growing up and figuring your life out, bopping around, being in Australia for a little while. But since I feel like, a couple of solid breakups in each of our lives, and after one of them, you're like, oh, I'm an adult now. Okay. I guess this is it. I've gone through a few things. Terrible things have happened to me, and I'm not dead. So I guess this is what it is. It's going to keep going like that. Yeah. Maybe I'll get a few more weird situations, maybe a couple more mates. Who knows? We'll find out, and it's mine. But it's great that you have an adult place, a place that's like you grew, no one's there to tell you, like we were talking about with our families, like sometimes they know too much, like their background with you is too layered with this idea of like, oh, but he's a good boy. And you're like, but who am I now? Like, and, you have this place and now it's all your own. Like if your parents came to visit you, you'd show them around. People would be like excited to meet them because of you, not the other way around. So there's something great about the ownership of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That is very much it. That's very well put, actually. And it's actually, that's really cool, actually, because, sometimes it's like, that's one of the things which I've really felt harder than I expected with people I know from back in the UK, is that I realize that so much has changed for me, that there's a lot of experiences and things like you just said, which I'm trying to put into words sometimes, which I realize that they can kind of like go, oh, that's cool, but they don't really get it because we've had such different experiences in the last, like 6 or so years that have really sort of, and whilst they might be, like, oh, that sounds positive and I'm sympathetic and, and I like the fact that it sounds that you seem happy because of it, at the same time, you're like, well, they don't really understand how to deal with that information and how to process it and how to then, and simultaneously, that they'll have had big things that have changed in their life, which I'm a bit like, oh, cool. That's very different to how things have gone for me. Great, and I guess there's like that relative distance. So it's the acknowledgement that it's like, you don't just hold on to something for the sake of holding on to it. If you found something that's really good for you at that point in your life, then, you should really hold on to it and make the most of it and really enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah. And even though things end doesn't make them like bad or over necessarily, like we talked about being many different people. I'm still the girl who grew up in Boston and went to private school with an all-girls private school. Does that dictate what I do today? No, but the experience of that is woven into where I'm at, how I understand things in a larger sense. This is where I spent my adolescence, so that means I understand life this way, that kind of stuff. Like, I am always trying to analyze my past to understand where I'm at right now, and I just feel like every part is important. And we don't keep in touch with everybody, but they were there at the time and they were important in that moment. And I, especially because of improv, I try to appreciate that. Like an improv scene happens and then it's over and then you never return to it. But that doesn't mean it's less than. That doesn't mean that your whole life isn't different because you had that improv scene. Like it is, because you had an experience and that's now part of who you are. And then we get to decide what we want to do with all the knowledge that we have. And sometimes it's, I want to spend more time with these people. And sometimes it's like, they're doing fine. I'm going to continue to find other adventures, Thank God we live in a time when you can like get in a plane or a train and just go somewhere else, right? There were times when people were like, so this is the house we all live in forever. Yeah. And you guys will marry each other and that's what'll happen. Like, okay, cool. Yeah. So we have these freedoms. Like, it's exciting that you get to live in the Netherlands and that you get to like make this decision and have this new community. And it doesn't take away from any of the other people. Like, maybe they understand, maybe they don't. Understanding is their problem, not yours. Like, we can just be who you are, and then they like it or not. It's like the audience, right? I have such an issue with the audience because you can't control them, right? Yeah. They get it or they don't. And the only thing you can do is before you put out the show, try to imagine who you think might come and try to lean it towards them. Right? Like whenever I'm doing sketch comedy shows at the theaters in downtown Austin, I'm like, so our audience is liberal 20-somethings. That's who's coming, okay? We're going to do jokes for them. We're not doing jokes where it's like, guys, but aren't the Republicans making some good points? No, that you're not going to make that joke because they're not going to laugh, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you have to lean into whatever that is. All that is to say, my rambling aside, all that is to say, the journey is important as a whole, and no part needs to be discounted purely because of it being in the past.
Very true. Yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah, there's always, I mean, like, I do sometimes, there's always a temptation to kind of like, to emphasize the positivity of the now, because you're kind of like, this is the situation that you have. And, I think there's like a human instinct that you will always look at what your current situation is and sort of justify the path that you took to get there and say like, that was, you'll make a narrative which makes it sound like, this is perfect, this is great. It's a very sort of human thing to do. It kind of keeps you sane. But it's like the fact is like there are lots of things in my past and things which, the me now probably couldn't imagine living through or living in. But the fact that I did and the fact that I experienced them is what has made the me who is now. And if I hadn't, then that me now would have been different and would not have kind of appreciated a particular thing about it, which I can't necessarily understand on a really kind of quantifiable level. But it's there, and it's made who I am.
Totally. So right now, I know that the world's a little paused, but is there any like art that you're working on right now that you're really excited about, or a project that you've had in the works that, maybe is coming out or anything like that you're like into? It's also totally fine if you're like, I've been alone for 4 weeks and I'm doing paintings of this one pair that as it decays, and that's fine too. What's going on with you right now?
The funny thing is so there's two things that I've been really trying to focus on. One of which is the fact that I'm trying to spend a bit more time on like solo sketch comedy. Just in the sense of like, it's like one of my difficulties is relying on other people. So I'm like, well, why don't I? I see people like Limmy, the Scottish comedian, and I'm like, well, why can't I just play every role in this particular thing? Why can't I get better at adapting to someone who isn't on camera and getting better at video editing to an extent where it is just me, I mean, sure, Eddie Murphy put us off that for a long time, but there is the positivity if you can kind of like really take those different takes and really understand where your characters are coming from in a particular sketch. So that's one thing which I've been trying to do more of and really explore and the directing on that. But another thing is that I have this improvised interview series called Real Power Talk, which I do in coordination with a music magazine, where we get like bands who are touring, like usually world tours, things like this, and they're doing like publicity interview things as part of that tour. And we will organize an interview with them, but they will think it's just like a regular interview saying like, oh, who are your inspirations? Oh, well, what was the inspiration for the new album, et cetera, except instead it's me playing multiple different characters who have different traits about them, which kind of, which are often very unsuitable for an interviewer. And then the pandemonium that ensues based on the fact that they don't realize that they're being interviewed by a character, and then they may be answering sincerely, and then there's different attributes to these characters. And so it all sort of slightly falls apart, and you get these like real reactions from them. And we've had like a lot of backlogs of episodes of that, but I've been doing a lot of editing on, which has been cool because I've actually had some time to just sit on the sofa and do some video editing, which, so those two projects have really kind of overwhelmed me lately because I'm kind of like, now suddenly I've got all this time to spend on my laptop rather than do things. And so I'm trying to make the most of it in that sense. So, yeah, but I'm sure. But there are also times where I kind of like go, I'm done with editing. I would like to do a thing now, But what can we do?
Yeah, totally. I went to the bank the other day and talked way too long to the teller through the speaker. I'm like, how's it going? You guys cool in there? What's happening? Like, oh boy.
This isn't a robbery. Just to make it
whatever you want in the deposit, do what you need to in there, guys. Just keep talking to me.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's a strange one. I mean, like, because I've got a girlfriend now. We've been going out for a few months, and it's kind of like it's a really weird situation that we would be going out for long enough that things were going good, but not long enough that we would like move in together yet. Yet because of this situation and social isolation, now for the last just over a month, I've been living in her place basically, and it's one of those make or break type situations, right? Because you're kind of like, well, we wouldn't never have naturally have made this decision, but let's see how it goes. What's the worst that can happen? The alternative is just not see each other at all during this phase, and it's been surprisingly awesome, and in a way that was totally unexpected because of the fact that it's we are spending so much time together right now, and we are so dependent on each other for every single aspect of human interaction. That whole kind of I need you to be everything to me, and that's not fair to ask of anyone, yet somehow we're actually getting on really good. And, I'm touching wood right now because I know that I'm a difficult person to get on with fundamentally. And obviously I'm speaking on my behalf, but it's really cool. And it's unexpected.
I know I've only talked to you for an hour and a half, but you seem pretty easygoing. I don't know. My 90 minutes with you is, I'm going to stay for the record.
Oh, well, I'll take that. I feel like it's a good interview. It's you put me at ease, very much so. This is really cool. I really like this.
Oh, good. I appreciate you being on the podcast and chatting with me. One final question before I let you go, back to the magical life that you're living. Yeah. If you had any advice for people who are trying to get involved in comedy, maybe they, like you, have this feeling inside of them that they want to be involved in comedy, but they just don't know what to do, what advice would you give them to get started or move forward in their creative pursuits?
It's very clear. Don't be precious. Just keep doing things. Do things. It doesn't matter if it's good, bad, the best thing or whatever. Just keep creating, keep trying these things, just keep going, and don't just kind of hold on to something because you think it's the best thing in the world. Move on to the next thing. Keep going. The thing is, keep trying to find that thing that really gives you joy. And even though you may have thought you've found the thing that is going to be everything about you and it is so good, don't look at it that way. Just look at it as that you've had this great experience to make something, and now you're looking for that next thing. There's always been a part of my brain that's kind of just wanted to hold on to this one particular thing that I've just finished or just worked on, and just kind of bathe in it and just sort of say, this is the greatest thing. I have achieved something magnificent. And then, have the inevitable thing where you're like, why is not everyone else appreciating it as much as I had hoped that they would? And instead, just really kind of just don't care about the audience. Just, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the thing is you're going to make mistakes. You're going to bomb. You're going to, forget your lines. You're going to just corpse. You're going to freeze on stage. You're going to make things which are just not up to the standard of what your expectations are in your brain. But it doesn't matter. Just keep going. Just make more. Just go and go and go, and just and just love it. That's the big lesson for me, is just to keep going.
Yeah. I think the precious comment is very important, especially for longevity when it comes to creating stuff. There's no way you're going to be able to continue to create things and keep a handle on any part of the process if you are too precious with specific stuff. I mean, even in screenwriting, they're get that first draft out now because it's crap and you need to edit it. That first draft is always terrible. You think the first draft of Home Alone was the best? Nope. There were many edits of that, right? You have to get it out of you and not worry about what it is and then edit it from there, as opposed to maybe I should do this, maybe not. It's like adventures even. If you're not like trying, if you're not like stepping into that room, you'll never know if you can do it or not do it. Or if like you even want to be part of that crowd. There's lots of different kind of like comedy scenes and groups and stuff. You know, maybe you go into one group, they're not your fit. Betcha there's another one, and you can go to another group, and maybe they're your crowd. Like, in Austin, there's like 5 or 6 different, like, theater communities, more than that even. Like, and you can just sort of like, if you hang out with this crowd and it's more your speed, great, that's your crowd. That's what you're going to do. But if you're like, they don't really vibe with the way what I think is funny, there's about 16 other people you can find. And then like, that guy thinks you're hilarious. Go hang out with him. Great. You know, it's like, I mean, not that you should always search for people that agree with you, but sometimes that's what you're looking for when you're trying to find friends, especially in the early on. You have to find a group that like vibes with you to help you create. And then after you find the group that vibes with you, well, then you got to go to the people who totally disagree and see if you can't get better by figuring out why it is that they totally disagree with everything that you do.
Yeah, it's a balance, isn't it? Because you got to get that thing where you keep kind of going forward and nurturing like your spirit and your you know what you're good at, but simultaneously it's like you do need some sort of positive reaffirmation. You need something that kind of like makes you go like, yeah, you know, I can keep going. It's that balance between kind of like, yeah, this is wrong, but this is right. But yeah, and finding whatever that balance works best for you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Man. Awesome. Stephen, thank you so much for chatting with me and sharing your stories with the podcast.
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate you just sharing your journey with us. The idea of traveling to so many different places seems implausible, seems like crazy town. Like, how is that even a thing? But you did it, and you're like thriving and moving through, and like this is just your adventure. And I'm sure to you, you're like, that's just what people do. But they don't, right? Like, some people just live in Milwaukee forever, you know? So like, guys, the adventures are out there. You can take them. Just like take a chance and move, figure it out. There'll be a group of people you can connect with. Just really great. Thank you so much for sharing it all.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Yes But Why Podcast. Check out all our episodes on yesbutwhypodcast.com or check out all the content on our network, HC Universal, at hcuniversalnetwork.com.